creeping back up. I mean, I don't know where it's going. We had another death in Tillamook today and another one a couple days before. We're up to 61 or 62 now. It's just kind of out there. Now they're talking about you got to have a third booster and then be prepared for a fourth one in the fall. My wife's going, I don't know if I want to take any more shots.
I think I'll be happy to take one if they think it will be helpful to me. And
Yeah.
I haven't had any ill effects from the first 3.
But if you went and had four, that means you've had 4 shots in like a year or a little more than a year. When did we have those first ones? It was in March. It was about a year ago.
January, February of 2021.
Yeah. So I've had 3 so far, and they're talking about, you need another one.
Believe me, if you've had COVID, you will take every shot that comes along.
Yes.
I had it in January, and there's still after effects I'm still feeling. So don't mess around with it, please.
Yeah. Where's Hans today?
He's here,
Oh, he is? Oh, there he is.
smiling and everything.
Okay, it's 3
Oh,
o'clock.
wow.
We all ready to get going here? Well, the city council workshop to order, and as everybody should know by this time, this is a council workshop where we discuss issues sometimes in detail, but we're not going to make any decisions today. The public is welcome to join us, but public comments are normally not taken at these workshops. So I'm going to start with the first item we're going to talk about today is a workforce housing tax abatement program. And Layla, why don't you lead us off for that one?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good to see everybody today. I'm so excited to have both this agenda item on for discussion today, as well as having our partners from the county, TJ Fiorelli and Sarah Absher here. 10 months ago, Commissioner Scar and Sarah came to our council meeting and shared their housing plan, the Tillamook County Housing Plan, and their findings from the county's housing needs assessment. And it left me shocked, really. I mean, I think I spent a couple months sort of picking my job off the ground in terms of the understanding of the housing crisis that this county is facing. I spent many years in Milwaukee working on implementation of a housing strategy and seeing the need that was there. It's still very strong, but it pales in comparison. So that was a real eye-opener. I think we all know that housing affordable to those earning less than the area median income is in deficit. And when it's available, it's in really short supply. And I've had numerous conversations with business owners, with younger people, older people, folks that just want to be in this community that just really can't find a place to live. And it's a two-way street, right? We have to be able to pay enough in wages so that people can afford to live here. But later, when we talk about the salary study, you'll see that even cities like ours struggle with that. Government, I think, can influence the housing market in a few key ways. There's probably more than this, but I think this is a good assessment of what we can do for this discussion. We can do it through regulation, right? So our zoning code, our zoning ordinance actually defines our ability to provide housing. It's the code that allows for multiple housing types. That's what incentivizes new units. And we know for a fact that any new housing is good for the market. Cash money, that's the other way that we can help. And most of us in these smaller communities don't have those kinds of resources, such as urban renewal or through construction excise tax, for example, specific to affordable housing. Isn't to say we couldn't pass a CET locally. We can talk about that another time. But cash incentives can really be used to help buy down the cost of housing and to help secure income restricted housing. And then thirdly is incentives, and those can be in the form of code-based incentives. So using the zoning code to do that, or oftentimes it's foregoing of revenue. So things like system development charge waivers, which in our community probably wouldn't make a huge deal because we don't have significant SDCs, and we'll talk about that later too, but also tax abatement. And again, in our community, we don't have a huge tax base here. So those types of abatements don't really carry a lot of weight. They do when we're partnered with other jurisdictions. And I'm so excited about this program because we can put our abysmal tax rate, for the better. I think on average, folks in Manzanita pay $150 to $200 a year. I'm gonna say that again, like $150 to $200 a year to the city in taxes. What I'm recommending we do is we forego that revenue because then we can leverage the additional $3,000 or more paid to the other taxing districts to incentivize the construction of new workforce housing. And we'll be setting in place a very critical tool to help us support housing in our community. The county's done all the hard work, and I will hopefully not suck all the air out of the room from TJ here, but he'll talk through the program in detail. But I do want to highlight the county did the work. They went through, they passed this countywide. They did all the efforts it took to get 51% of the taxing districts to vote yes, having taken 2 affordable housing tax abatement programs through. I know how hard that is. So the fact that we don't even have to do that, and they're using their operator fee to help backfill the fire district lost revenue. So there's really so much win involved in this. So, I think, and all we have to do, is implement the ordinance locally. So I keep thinking there's a catch, and I've talked to Sarah and CJ, and I've grilled them, and I've asked them 1,000,001 questions. So I'm bringing them here today for you to do the same. But I would really love to get direction from this council after this meeting today to potentially pursue and become the first city in Tillamook County to adopt this abatement program locally. So with that, I will close my comments and get off my soapbox and hand the stand over to TJ and Sarah. Thanks.
Good afternoon, City Council, and thank you very much, Layla, for the introduction. Sarah and I, Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development, and myself, I'm the Housing Coordinator for Tillamook County, are here today to talk to you about the property tax exemption. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I have a presentation prepared for you all. So just a quick thumb up from folks. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Thank you all for having me here today. For those of you who haven't had a chance to meet me yet, and I think this is probably most of you here, I haven't had a chance to talk to most people in North County at this point. I've been in my position for about 6 months now. And in that time, I've been working with the Department of Community Development and other partners throughout the community to try to understand what are the challenges that we face with housing and what are the solutions that we have in place currently, as well as solutions that we could develop in the future. I come to you with a background in land use planning, and I also have taught at the University of Oregon as a planning instructor. I come to Tillamook County after leaving Lane County, being there for several years. So we've watched the implementation of lots of policies and incentives that typically aren't available in rural communities. So what we're presenting to you here today, and echoing what Layla said a moment ago, is a program that has already been developed. The county, before I came into this position, did most of this footwork. And so I'm excited to carry this forward, show you what we have today. And I look forward to hearing feedback later on from Layla and the council. So I'll go ahead and get this to work. Here we go. I just want to start with a brief overview of the Housing Commission. Those of you who are familiar, back in 2017, there was a housing report that was commissioned. This helped us understand the broad issues in housing, but we didn't quite dive into the real details quite yet. In 2018, the Housing Commission was officially formed. And in 2019, we had our first housing coordinator on board. Shortly thereafter, there was a housing summit, and the video from that housing summit is available on our website. In January of 2020, the Housing Commission produced the housing needs analysis. I'll be talking to you today about some of the punchlines that came from there, the things that we need to focus on. And then in November 2020 through October 2021, before I came on board, but when there was no housing coordinator in my role, the Housing Commission, at the direction of Director Absher, did some amazing work. And much of what we'll be talking to you about today is a result of that work. Just a quick note that the Housing Commission meets once a month on the first Thursday at 9 a.m. The link for accessing our virtual meeting is available on our website. Please also note that beginning tomorrow, which is our first Housing Commission meeting, we're going to be having in person. And so you could also, anybody could attend at the Port of Tillamook. I wanted to mention that we have members who are appointed by the Board of County Commissioners very intentionally to represent the full county, not just Central County, not where we have density, but also because we have representatives in specific needs who are in North County and South County, incorporated areas, as well as unincorporated communities. So there's strong representation on the Housing Commission from many different people, including in North County. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the data and analysis that underpins the need for programs like the property tax exemption. Our housing needs analysis, which I spoke to you about a few minutes ago, looked at our 20-year population growth and forecast that we would see about 2,936 year-round residents over the next 20 years move to Tillamook County. And when accounting for that, as well as seasonal housing needs, there is a clear need for somewhere between 2,300 to 2,600 new net dwelling units throughout Tillamook County. That's a significant number of units. And I'd like to also mention that it's about 150 a year that we need just to keep pace with growth. And so while we're also trying to achieve this long-term goal, there are annual needs that aren't quite being met yet. When we talk about the kind of housing that works in rural communities, in particular places like Tillamook County, I want to focus your attention on something that we refer to as the missing middle. So this is both in terms of income, the amount of money that people can spend and how much it costs to develop housing that is affordable to people who typically are in the workforce. That's missing, but also the piece of about density. We have lots of single family homes in Tillamook County. We probably won't ever see the kind of density that we typically see in larger communities. But that sweet spot right there in the middle, somewhere between a duplex and a sixplex, is modest, medium density housing that we can achieve here in Tillamook County. But sometimes it takes a little bit of assistance to help folks get there. The housing needs analysis recommended in terms of our short-term actions to work with cities and to identify publicly owned properties, and then also to encourage development. And that's what I want to talk to you about. We have a property tax exemption here at the county. So a little overview about property taxes is that every property is assigned, of course, an assessed value. And properties are taxed at a percentage of that assessed value for all taxing districts. The county collects and distributes taxes to those districts. And Oregon enables several exemptions that local governments may implement in order to incentivize housing at the local level. Our workforce housing tax exemption that we're talking to you about today was enabled for cities and counties to adopt. It's a full property tax exemption enabled under House Bill 2377 in 2017 and codified in Chapter 624 of the Oregon laws. What the city or county, whichever adopts, must do is define what is affordable. We've done that in our ordinance, and that ordinance is available on our website. And it also asks us to establish duration of the exemption based on how many units are going to actually fall within the affordable range that we're targeting. It applies to all eligible property anywhere in the jurisdiction that is passed in order. And it must be multi-unit rental housing. So this can't be housing that somebody intends to sell. It must remain rental housing. There are some conditions to take into account. The first is that it exempts all property taxes from all that have boundaries surrounding that property. It exempted units can never be used typically as short-term rentals. Now, that is not something that is required through legislation at the state level. This was required at the local level. And we have that implemented in our ordinance to ensure that these units will indeed remain available for people who need to rent them. And the other thing to point out is that applicants must reapply every year. What this means is that we're able to ensure that the rent threshold that we require them to remain below truly is affordable every single year. They don't just get a 10-year exemption and tell us on the first year, and then we don't know for the following 9 years. They must resubmit every single year. There are some eligibility conditions. So the property tax exemption only applies for new construction or rehabilitated housing. There are some conditions around the rehabilitation. We can talk about details for that at another time. I want to focus on the high level stuff here. Like, for example, the rent range. These rentals must remain below 120% of the area median income. I'll talk to you in just a moment about what that means. They must remain, again, multi-unit rental housing. So again, they can't be sold. And the property tax exemption can apply for up to 10 years. Here's a little information about eligibility. So first off, the duration really depends on the percentage of the units in the project that will remain below an affordable range. So they must remain below the 120% of area median income. If they have only 10% of their units just for specifically affordable housing below the 120% range, then they'll get 1 year of exemption. If they have kept all of their units below that AMI range, then they will get the full 10 years. And on the right-hand side, you see a table that helps us understand what the rents actually break down to in order for a developer or property owner to be eligible for this property tax exemption. Keep in mind that for each bedroom, you can have an occupancy of up to 2 people. So for a family of 8, in a 4-bedroom unit, the maximum that could be rented for that unit is $2,550 a month. For a single individual at the highest range living in an efficiency unit, that would be $1,352 a month. And many of you are probably very well aware that these rental rates are far below what the market is commanding right now. And so this would make a big difference for people in our community who are struggling with housing. And it would make a big difference for the folks who are trying to develop it and keep rents low enough to make it affordable for our workforce. I want to give you an example here today. I want to talk about a project that might cost around $5 million. And what I've done is pulled the tax rates from the county and created this spreadsheet to give you a sense of how this would actually work out for a developer, and also give you the perspective of, as a city, what this would mean for you and the exemption that you'd be allowing for this project. Notice that at the very top, Tillamook County, representing 13% of the full tax on this property, is the largest entity to be exempting taxes. And actually over 1 year, the county would exempt $7,400, and over that 10-year period of time, it would be $74,000 for the county. If you look at our other taxing districts, the city of Manzanita represents 4% of the total tax that will be collected for that property. In 1 year, we're talking about $2,000. And this is a large project too. This is not a single family home. This is a pretty big project. We're talking about 1 year, $2,000, and over 10 years, about $21,000. Notice in the right-hand column, I've also broken down another number from the perspective of the renter. How much money will actually be realized in savings for that renter should the developer or the property owner actually be able to exempt those taxes. We're talking about around $400 a month per unit. That's around what we could reduce.
Hey, TJ,
Mhm.
just real quick, on the math side of it, we're actually, I think we're not maybe 4%, but it's actually 0.4. It ends up being about $200 a year at the city level. So.
Well, this is for a $5 million project.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're talking about the average that comes in
Gotcha.
from a single
Thank
family
you.
home. And that was the qualification I made a moment ago. This is a big project. So
Yeah.
I think that would put lots of units on the ground, maybe 10 times that or 12 times in fact.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So for each unit, we're talking about $400 reduction just in the property tax exemption alone that will be realized in a lower rent. I want to talk to you a little bit about the technical assistance that the county can provide to cities. So first off, program support and options. The county is willing to manage the administration of this program. So it puts no administrative burden on the cities. The city or the county may amend its ordinance or repeal it at any time. What this means is that it affects future properties. However, those who have already been approved keep the exemption for the term that they have been given. If both the city and the county adopt an ordinance, the property owner may choose which one that they would like to take. So this leaves room for the city of Manzanita to create a property tax exemption that is unique and specific for your community, using the technical assistance we provide, as well as the ordinance we've created as a jumping off point. So I want to stop there. This was a 50,000-foot view of the property tax exemption program. I wanted to give you some basic details and then also get some questions and feedback from you all. So I'll stop there and I'll let Layla, you go ahead and run that next part.
Well, thanks. No, it was a great presentation and sorry for the confusion there, but the 12 units, it ends up being about $200 a unit that we're foregoing. So yeah, with that, council, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, and facilitate it.
Does anybody at the council have any questions on this?
I have a general question. I'm just curious if there's been any feedback from, well, it's hard to call them a development community here in Delaware County. I don't know if we have a development community, but I'm wondering here in Manzanita, especially with the cost of land and the cost of construction and everything else, I don't mean to dismiss that this is anything is a move in the right direction, and this sounds very helpful. But I'm curious, in the mind of the $5 million developer, has there been any feedback? Is anybody excited about this that might actually be putting money in the ground?
Thank you, Counselor. I very much appreciate your question. So there are two things that we are doing. One is creating a way to touch base with developers and ask them very specific questions about the challenges and the kinds of incentives that would motivate them. We don't have that data yet, but we do have very good communication with our developers. And the folks that I've talked with anecdotally have told me that this would be beneficial. On a project like this, we're talking about $500,000 over the course of 10 years. That's pretty significant for a pro forma to pencil out, and oftentimes can make the difference. They're just a little hair over oftentimes what makes it affordable. This can bring them below that threshold.
PJ, I was wondering about, you mentioned that the units cannot be sold, and is that specific unit or a specific unit, or is that the entire complex? And I guess the question I have is, if a developer were to take this project on under these conditions, are they prevented from selling the entire complex for the period of time, like 10 years, or can they midstream say, this isn't working, I'm selling out, and either evict or change the rules to the tenants?
So these properties can absolutely be transferred. I can tell you that the state never would have been able to pass this legislation with the private sector having an issue with that. They absolutely would. They would have said something about that. These properties can be transferred. The condition is that they must remain rentals and they must remain below the threshold required for the legislation to continue to be in place. If it becomes a condominiumized project and people actually own those units rather than renting them, the exemption would most likely go away. But if they're just sold to another operator who then charges the same rents and stay below that threshold, they would continue to receive the property tax exemption.
Okay, I guess that brings up another, I'm a little confused now. So is there any way for a developer to build this project and 3 years into it, decide it's not working for them and sell the units individually and turn them into condominiums?
No, if they did that, they would lose their property tax exemption because the condition of the exemption is that they remain for rental housing.
No, I realize that. I realize that they're going to lose their property tax exemption. But I'm thinking of a scenario where you were to do this 3 or 4 years into it, decide to sell them as condominiums, and the tenants who were living there in with rent that it was are evicted essentially in order to sell them as condominiums.
So maybe you can clarify your question. I'm not sure exactly what we're asking here.
I don't buy, but if someone buys a unit, they take advantage of the tax exemption in a 10-year program. In 3 or 4 years, they decide it's not working for them and they choose to convert the units into condominiums. They recognize they're going to lose tax incentives that they have had for the first 3 or 4 years, but the tenants who are in the units cannot afford to buy the units and they are essentially evicted out of the complex.
That is correct. Yes, that is effectively what would happen in that case.
So there is no way, I mean, you get 3 or 4 years out of it, but you wouldn't necessarily always get 10 years out of it, I guess is what I'm asking.
That's correct. And the developer may not get the full 10 years. It really depends on the percentage of the units in the project that they choose to keep below the threshold that's required. And they can.
I wasn't trying to ask a difficult question. I just wanted to have a full understanding what the potentials were. Doesn't mean that I don't think it's a great program. So.
Yeah, your point is well taken. That absolutely could happen.
So let me ask a question. There's no minimum that the developer has to stay in this program. It's a year-by-year deal, right?
That is correct. And they must recertify each year.
And it looked like from that scale you showed, let's say they have 10 units. They could decide after a year or two to take 2 units out of the program and still get some exemption, right? They don't have to do it as a whole.
Typically what will happen is they won't be able to, unless there's a very, very good reason to, remove units from the exemption. So if they say they're going to keep a number of units below the threshold, they'll have to keep it for that full term.
Okay, so when they start, let's say it's 10 units, they can make a decision, I'm going to have 5 units in this program and 5 units will be at the market rate. They can do that too, right?
Yes, they can. And they'd get a 5-year exemption.
Okay. Is there any?
I'm sorry.
Who's next?
I was going to ask a question
ahead,
about
Jerry.
the prohibition against the units becoming STRs. Now, I think you used the term forever. Did you mean that even beyond the abatement period, or is it limited?
No. If I use the term forever, that was I misspoke. It's only for the duration of the property tax exemption.
Is there any projects in Tillamook County that are on the table right now that are using this program?
Not yet. This program will be rolling out at the county level with the application live within the next month or so. And we're encouraging cities to do the same.
Okay, so if the city of Manzanita opted, we could easily opt into this as part of the county program and just join it. Is that right? Without too much detail or, I mean, what's the process for the city of Manzanita to partner with Tillamook County to do this?
Absolutely. So what you would want to do is pass your own board order, and there would be some conversation around that. We can have a longer meeting that gets into the details about implementation and how to do that on another day. And I would encourage us to do that in the near future. But basically, we just provide technical assistance and you would pass the board order.
Okay.
So TJ, how does it work with the other taxing authorities in our area, whether it be the fire district or the solid waste, all those folks? We'd all go do it together, or could certain jurisdictions opt out and not do it so they only get a portion of their, you understand my question?
I do. So once the property tax exemption has been passed by a city or a county, those are the only two taxing entities that can pass this, and they get at least 51% of the total number of taxing districts to jump on board, which we've done the work to do, then the property tax exemption applies to 100% all of the taxing districts that are affected around that property.
But within our taxing area, you're suggesting that you have 51% of all the other taxing authorities have already agreed to this?
Yeah, that's right. And I'll actually show you the screen again very quickly. If you notice, Tillamook County is 13%. The school district is 39%. And so those two alone get us above the 51%. But of course, the goal is to make sure that our other taxing districts are on board. And this is also where the arrangement with the fire district has come into play, and just making sure we're communicating with our partners.
So it's not 51% of the taxing districts, it's 51% of the actual tax.
No, 51% say we want to do this, and it applies to all of the taxing districts.
Oh, so it was like a vote. So you have a majority vote and it
Yep.
requires all the taxing districts to participate. Is that
It's very
correct?
much like a majority vote, 50+1, that's right.
And
Well,
so,
but I understand, I guess I don't understand, because you said Tillamook County and the school district represent the number you need, but that's the amount of percentage of tax. That's not the percentage of actual taxing districts.
So what we mean is the percentage of tax of the total. So in a 1-year period, the 58,137, 51% of that tax is from the county and the school district.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It sounded initially like you had to go and get every taxing authority of the whatever number there are on the screen would have to agree to this, and what you're suggesting, that's not the case. It just needs 51% of the actual dollar amount that's being taxed as a percentage.
Yes, exactly right.
so TJ, I forget how many have passed this so far?
No city has passed this so far. Should Manzanita choose to do so, it would be the first city in Tillamook County.
So the Tillamook County and the school district both have passed it?
That is correct. Both
Okay.
of those entities have approved the board order allowing for this to move forward. We have also communicated with other taxing districts, but we have the 51%.
Right, so TJ, if I could jump in here for just a moment. So Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development, for the record. Jake Davis, who was the former housing coordinator, and myself worked with several entities, including the Economic Development Council, to partner in development of the property tax exemption or abatement program. And we did notify all of the special districts about the development of this program. To be clear, the requirement, the threshold was to get that 51% special district approval. That only required, based on these percentages, the school districts and the county to achieve that threshold.
Okay.
So when you talk about the water district and others, because we reached that 51% with these entities, they may or may not, they were notified of the process. They did not participate or respond to the process, but the county was able to pass the exemption because we met our requirement for that 51%. It may be something that the city wants to do, would be to reach out to other districts within your area. And we're certainly happy to help you do that, to facilitate the conversation, at least to help them understand and know what this would mean for properties within Manzanita moving forward with an exemption. but we're there. The county met that benchmark for everyone. And TJ is correct in that the short-term rental operator license fee would go to offset any, I don't want to say lost revenue, tax revenue from the fire districts, because the reality is that without this exemption program, there are many properties that could remain vacant. Right. So this is the bridge. This is the gap. We all give a little bit. We all get something that goes in on the tax roll in 10 years that perhaps wouldn't have ever gotten there anyway. But with the fire districts were very active in the discussion and actually attended the Housing Commission meetings where we talked about the property tax exemption program. And it was clear that, because of the capacity concerns that they have, we wanted to make sure we could supplement their budget for that perceived loss of tax revenue that isn't really there, but in their minds, they want to make sure that they're getting that supplemental revenue for their operations. For an active tax exemption in a district, in a fire district, we now have a revenue stream to supplement and offset that for them so that they will continue to receive revenue during a tax exemption period. And
So
then they supported it.
So that comes from short-term rental, did you say?
Correct. So the short-term rental operator license fee was created specifically to support housing and public safety initiatives. And that is an operator license fee that short-term rentals within unincorporated Tillamook County pay.
Okay.
And that money is earmarked to help supplement fire districts for this program, for the exemption program. And then we are actually getting ready to open our first round of local grant opportunities for housing developments with that revenue as well.
Well, Sarah, this looks like a very well thought out program where you've taken a lot of issues into account. I particularly am thrilled to see the administrative costs are borne by the county. That makes a huge difference for the city. And we really need affordable housing. So at least for myself, I really congratulate you and TJ for the great work you've done. And I really hope that we can take advantage of it. So thank you very much. You rock.
Do you have another question, Jerry?
Just one quick one, and it kind of dovetails on what Linda said. So it's great if the county can bear the administrative burden of implementing this for us. Would that be the case even if we, TJ, you suggested that we could pass our own ordinance to sort of tailor the program somewhat to Manzanita? The two ordinances, I would assume, would work in concert. If we had our own tweak to the county ordinance, would you still be able to carry the administrative burden for us?
I think that question I would defer to Director Absher. What I'll say in preface of that is simply that the developer could choose which of the property tax exemptions they'd like to select. So if you had something that was slightly different from the counties and had different requirements for the percentage or the time that they would get the exemption for, then the developer could look at the counties and look at Manzanita's and select which one, but they wouldn't work in concert necessarily. They wouldn't be combined. I'll let Director Absher comment on the administrative piece.
Sure. Thank you, TJ. So the answer, yes, we would be happy to carry those administrative duties. It makes sense because of the interface of this program, our efforts to address the county's housing crisis, and then also our close work with the Tillamook County Assessor's Office, that the department manage the administrative duties for an exemption program. We're happy to support the cities in fulfilling that role because we hope to have a partnership with you. And that's a way that we can contribute moving forward into the future. What that would look like annually is a report where we would report out to each of the cities that have an active property tax exemption, what was done that year, and then also confirming that the applicant who has the exception is continuing to meet the requirements to keep that exception in good standing.
Mayor, can I just echo Linda's, Council President Kozlowski's comments that I also appreciate I think more than anything that we've been talking about this issue for a number of years, and to see some action happening where people are putting together plans and concepts. Whether it works for Manzanita, I don't know that. The jury's still out on that. I will say, though, that Manzanita is something of an enviable position because our property tax rate, on one hand, is a terrible negative for us, but in this case, it's actually quite a positive for us because we don't actually lose a whole lot of money by participating in the program because the tax rate is so low. But I just wanted to express my appreciation as well to both Sarah and TJ for both an excellent presentation and spending the time to put together an actual plan to attack what is and has been a significant problem in our community. So thank you.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Steve. With our small property tax base, this is a small burden on the city of Manzanita if we piggyback on with the county. And hopefully we can find a project that's in our area or in our urban growth area or somehow that we could get going on. This would be great. It's not a real burden for us because we collect such a small tax rate. So I think I can sense from everybody's conversation that it's just something we probably ought to pursue and get on the council agenda and make a decision on and piggyback on with the county, unless anybody objects to that.
No, I think the most interesting thing is Hans' question. Will the developers, is this enough of a savings to get the developers involved? I really hope it is.
I would just, if I could just toss a couple thoughts in, every bit helps. You're stacking incentives like all of you have recognized, and I'm so pleased and unsurprised that you did, what an advantage this tool is. And so this is a start. I think that typically on projects I've worked on, there's multiple layers that come. So what we're doing is we're saying, and I think we're sending a really important message to the development community too, by passing this. If you direct me to move forward with it, that sends a really important message. And like I said, there's kind of 3 tools that we have in our toolbox. When we start to layer those on, it does start to make a huge difference. And I'll tell you, in Milwaukee, it took us about 3 to 4 years to get, a bunch of incentives and regulations in place. In fact, they'll be passing the housing code, I might cry, on the 19th, I think. And we've seen almost, 200 units of affordable workforce housing getting developed there, and almost 1,000 units either in construction or in the pipeline. But it took a few years and it took a number of layers. So I just, I think it is important. I think it will make a difference. And just a quick PSA, public service announcement. So we were talking about evictions, and this is something that's pretty close to my heart. Senate Bill 608 was passed by the state a couple of years ago, and that puts in place restrictions on no-cause evictions. And so after a year of renting, landlords cannot evict tenants except for 4 sort of landlord-based reasons. And if they do, they have to provide 90 days notice and in some cases relocation. So just for the renters out there to be aware that you have rights that are enabled to you by the state.
That's great. That's good to hear.
Well, Leila, I think you've got consensus from the council to move this forward to a council agenda where we can make a vote and adopt this, make a decision, which we won't be able to do here today, but I think we're pointed in the right direction. And I really appreciate you guys coming and making this presentation. That was great. So,
Really good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thanks. Well, I'll follow up with Sarah and TJ, and both again, thank you both so much for all the hard work to get us here and answering all of my questions. And I'll look forward to working with you to run this through.
Thank you all so much. It's great to see you.
great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Okay, looks like we're right on schedule. We're going to move on to the second item we're going to talk about today is a police communication update with Chief Harth. Is the chief with us today?
Yes, good afternoon. So I've invited Rachel Haggerty, the Tillamook County Chief of Staff, and John Spence, the Tillamook County Communication System Administrator, to come speak to you about the ongoing radio project that's been looking into replace our emergency radio system that's aging and failing in the county. And this has been going on for these discussions for probably a little over 2 years now. And I'll turn it over to John and Rachel to give their presentation and update you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for inviting us to the meeting today. So John and I have been leading a user group of all the first responders throughout Tillamook County, police, fire, sheriff, ambulance, etc., through a process to upgrade the public safety radio communication system that all of our first responders depend on. This is a large, multi-million, multi-year effort that we are embarking on, and we have reached consensus with the user group on the preferred alternative to do this upgrade, as well as a path forward. But they represent boards and councils. And so over the last couple of months, John and I have been doing a roadshow of sorts to those different councils and boards to present what we're working on and get their input. What you are going to see today is a bit of a dated presentation, and we'll give you an update on how things have evolved the last couple of months and where we are today. But we do think it's important for you to see the same information that everybody else has been seeing the last couple of months. So we'll share the information and then talk about how things have been changing. But we continue to be on a great path and have consensus on how to move forward. So with that, the presentation. I'm not sure who's running the slides.
Rachel, you should be able to present, or I can put it up there.
Yep, you guys are both co-hosts, so
Okay.
whoever wants to.
Do you have it up, John? Or I can bring it.
I can get it up here. real quick.
Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought that.
Can you guys see that?
Yep,
You see the PowerPoint?
yes, we can.
Okay, great. Rachel, let me get back to your first slide here. I was prepping mine.
Okay.
Okay, you should be good to go.
I just see your desktop at this point.
Oh,
I saw the presentation before, but now I just see your desktop.
how about that?
There we go.
Okay,
And then can you start the slideshow? There we go.
should be started. Can you see it?
I can, it's just in a different view, but it's okay. Yeah, so go to the next slide.
Okay.
Thanks for queuing that up. So the Tillamook County radio system, with the exception of what 911 owns for the microwave components, is managed and owned by Tillamook County. So essentially the Tillamook County Board of Commissioners are charged with the function of the radio system. I'm the Chief of Staff for Tillamook County, and this is one of the projects that I'm working on with John Spence, who is the county's communications system administrator, which basically means he is our radio guy. He handles the entire system, keeps it running with the exception of a little bit of contracted work, but it's pretty much a one-man show, and he's been doing a great job of keeping this system running regardless of its age. Next slide. So there's 13 radio sites throughout the county. Some of these are on buildings, some of these are on mountaintops, some of them are owned by the county, and some of them we have lease agreements with private entities or public entities. Our role is to keep the VHS system components running and perform any site maintenance, management, ensure security. And we have a lot of partnerships which are very successful in keeping the system running. Next slide. We have a lot of people that depend on the system. To the left are the primary users, basically who you think of for first responders. And then of course at the bottom of that list is residents and visitors. When there's an emergency and we need a response from a first responders, we certainly depend on that system. We're also exploring some secondary or potential users, and we're still working through some of the particulars on this, but there are other entities that we want to be able to use interoperability with the system. And it may be on a daily basis, it may be when Cascadia hits, but we're working on building in that potential. Next slide. We won't go through all of these bullets, but basically this is an old system that has been built in pieces over time. It was never started from ground zero, built as an entire system. And so I think we're very fortunate to have it operating as it is today. The limitations, which is one of our primary drivers for this project, is we're lacking in reliable countywide coverage. And as you can imagine, our varying topography is a primary driver of that. And if you're for example, if you're in North County, you can't hear an emergency that's in South County or even closer, Central County. And there's no sustainable funding for administering the current system or replacements of any of the components. So the county general fund, with the exception of a few grants that we've been able to secure, small grants along the way, the county general fund is picking up the entire cost of all of the VHF components. Again, 911 owns the microwave components, but county's responsible for everything else. And so we have no savings for future investments in this upcoming upgrade. Next slide. So our goal is to develop a modern countywide radio system that provides efficient, reliable, and secure communication that services our first responders and public entities. We want to accommodate interoperability across agencies, and we need a new administrative structure. And so this is one of the things that we have been, which is a focus of part of this presentation today, is what are the different administrative structure options that we have at our disposal. And so over the last couple of months, as John and I have been making our way to the councils and boards, we've been sharing this information, these options, and asking for their input on which one they prefer. And we've been given some guidance on a preferred path that we're going down, and I'll speak to that. As well as a secure and stable funding for the construction, the construction of the new system. That is one piece of the funding strategy. We also need stable funding for the day-to-day maintenance once it is built. Then we need to be planning for, we need to be saving continually for increased maintenance costs as that system starts to age, as well as a future complete replacement or upgrade in 10, 15, 20 years. So all of those pieces are what you'll see in our funding strategy today. So we've completed a phase 1 assessment. We've hired a contractor, Federal Engineering, through a competitive process about 2 years ago. They completed an assessment of our entire system, went to all the radio towers, evaluated coverage, worked with all of the user groups who've been in the process all along the way. That was completed. And then they walked us through a process exploring alternatives, and everybody agrees on the conceptual design, and John will speak to that. This is a huge step forward than where we have been in the last 5-10 years. The fact that all of these user groups, which is a big group of, I mean, we're talking at least 30 people coming to these meetings, agree on how we should proceed, and that has not been the case. So I'm just really excited that everybody is at the table, everybody's collaborating, and we agree. It's a great place to be thus far. So where we are right now is in phase 3. So we are, presumably it looks like we're all in agreement toward the administrative structure, and so we're starting to work in more detail on how that is going to work and our paths to implement it, as well as a funding strategy. And John will be presenting some options on that. So that is where we are today. Once we land on what we want the structure to be and how we want to fund it, then we will start implementing those. So we will be putting something on the ballot, likely, whether it's a general obligation bond or a permanent levy or whatever option we end up proceeding with. There will be something that goes to the voters. The cost of this construction and the maintenance of it, unless there's other ideas you have, everybody agrees that there will need to be something that goes before the voters. And we're probably a year out from that. So you will see us again. We will need your support. We want your input on how to make this successful and what funding asks of the voters would be successful. So we're at the very beginning stages of this. Okay, next slide. So these are the four administrative options we've been looking at, and I won't go into all the details, but basically we've looked at an intergovernmental agency, a service district, and in two different forms of the special district. In an intergovernmental agency, basically any entity who wants to be a part of it can be a part of it. You drop the documents, you don't need an election. It can be, I would envision in this case, it would be a very large governing body because we have a large user group, and that can have pros and cons as far as decision making goes. An important distinction in the intergovernmental agency model is it doesn't have a lot of autonomy for what it can acquire and administer, or what it can acquire. So, for example, the intergovernmental agency itself cannot pursue and secure general obligation bond or a permanent tax, but a party to it can. So if the city of Manzanita or Tillamook County are a party to the intergovernmental agency, we could put something on the ballot and then through agreements funnel the money into the intergovernmental agency. There are several examples of this around the state, and those are listed there at the bottom of the table. Service district is an option that is allowed in statute as what's called a radio and data district. There would need to be elections to form it. The Board of Commissioners, in part by definition of a service district, would be the governing body. And then what we looked at for a service district is, a special district. There is an allowance in statute for a radio and data special district to be formed by a county election, also electing the board members. And this option, the district itself could levy taxes, general obligation bonds, and own land itself. And so this option really starts to break away from the county, which is desirous of the user groups, and become its own entity that's governing this public safety radio system. As you're probably aware, as we receive timber revenues into the county, they are distributed to all the taxing districts, as well as the county. Everybody gets a piece of the pie, and as you add a new taxing district into that, it further splits the pie. We haven't ran the numbers yet because of the stage that we are in at this process, but just something to keep in mind as we're creating a new special district. There's one example of this in the state, and that is at Umatilla, Morrow County. And this is a relatively new statute that was created to allow for radio and data to be a special district. So the last option is a heavier lift to the voters, but in an ideal world, if we weren't thinking of how we're actually getting to the end goal, could be a very efficient district, and that is the merging of the radio purposes and 911. And so how you would create this is there would be a series of questions on the ballot where you dissolve 911, create a new district, levy the 911 taxes, levy the radio and data taxes, and then you have a very clear budget that describes how those funds are spent. There's a couple of nuances to this option that have come up, but I think what we have heard from the user groups, as well as the council boards and districts that we have talked to thus far, including 911, this is the option that everybody unanimously prefers, which is very interesting to me because it is the heaviest lift, but everybody agrees that this is really how we should be pursuing the functions of 911 and the radio district. Another benefit to this is with 911 dissolving and creating a new district of which 911 services would be provided, it affords 911 the opportunity to create a new permanent tax rate, because right now they're locked into their current permanent tax rate. So we've shared this information with everybody, but not all of the councils and districts may have heard that the user group landed on the last column there. And so where we are right now is working through more of the particulars on how this would actually happen, answering some questions with the 911 district. There's a lot of work here left to do. This is a very complicated approach, but I think it's very exciting and a good path forward. So John is going to pivot now into some of the numbers and our funding strategy, but I'll pause here if there's any questions about the administrative structure. Or we can also take questions at the end, whatever you prefer.
Why don't you go ahead and Rachel, and we'll just hit the questions at the end.
Okay. I'll go on mute.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay,
We can hear
good.
you.
John Spence, Tillamook County Communications System Administrator, for the record. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing that first part. Most of you know Rachel, and she is a rock star. This is just one of, I think, a million projects she has going. So she and I have been working on this for countless hours, so I appreciate her help. So we're going to dive into kind of what we're looking at here from a functional point of view. A little bit of history. This started under my predecessors. The county worked to bring all of the first responders and the agencies who were part of this radio system to the table many years ago. Things kind of fell apart. Rachel and I were tasked with putting things back together, brought everyone back to the table, and we've had a fantastic working relationship with all of the first responders and people who depend on this system on a daily basis. And we really think like we're starting to get to where we need to be. So part of this history, about 2.5 years ago, we brought in a third-party contractor, Federal Engineering, and they came in and essentially performed an analysis and inventory of everything that was going on in Tillamook County related to public safety communications, and essentially took a snapshot of where we were, what the equipment was, what the users were utilizing on a daily basis for radio communications, what dispatch, everything down from their microwave to their consoles. So it was a very intensive look at where we were at public safety communication wise. Part of that was interviewing most of the first responders and asking them, what are your priorities? What would you like to see? What are the deficits of the current system? Chief Harth, Chief Bestwick were all part of this. Their crews were part of this, and they with their feedback contributed greatly to help Federal understand about where we needed to go and what we needed to get there. So we arrived, basically, we had pared it down originally to 3 options. The first responder community was given 3 options, and what we landed on was essentially a 3-channel P25 phase 2 trunk system. Okay, that's just the fancy radio talk. What does that actually mean? Well, right now in the county, we have a disjointed radio system. And what I mean by that is if Chief Harth has a major law enforcement incident and he needs the cavalry to come from Central and South Tillamook County, there's a very good chance on any given day that law enforcement may not be able to hear him. So that brings in the critical element of dispatch to relay those communications back and forth, which takes resources, takes time, and it essentially ties up resources that could be more efficiently used if the users were able to talk to each other without having to go through a third party. So essentially what we're looking at is a system that the first responders, no matter fire, law enforcement, EMS, other people that maybe need to be like state parks or someone that may be folded in based on the incident, can all have a pool of radio channels that essentially the computer is doing all the thinking for itself and assigning the most efficient way of communication, and it's doing all this in real time. So that is light years away from what we're doing now, where a first responder might have to literally reach down while he's going 60 miles an hour, he or she, and turn the radio channels to reflect where they are geographically in the county. So a number of officer and first responder safety issues there, not to mention just the inefficiency of the way the system currently works. So that's kind of where we started with how to build what the first responders needed in the system. Talk a little bit about the cost. So keep in mind, these numbers are roughly 2 years old now with what's been going on in the world, just inflationary cost of goods and services, the civil aspect of third-party contractors, and all of the things that go into constructing and designing and engineering a radio system have gone up considerably. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that these numbers are actually old, and we have some updated numbers that we're going to be folding in and re-releasing, but we wanted to make sure that everyone saw the same numbers during our first round of presentations to the councils. Little bit about, I'm going to talk essentially about two major costs today, and they're very different from one another. So the first one that you have here in front of you, this is the actual nuts and bolts of building the system that we need on the ground, replacing all the things that we have in play that need to be revamped and replaced in order to get the system that I talked about just a second ago. So this would be separate from the item I'm going to talk about later, which will be the administration or a district or whatever entity is decided upon that will handle the day-to-day operations, the administration of actually administrating this radio system on an annual basis. So the land mobile radios, this is all of the infrastructure on your mountaintops, your gear that goes into getting communications from point A to point B and back. The subscriber radios, this is what the actual radio units that are going to be on the hips or in the cars or in the dispatch centers of all the first responders. The dispatch element here would be the consoles and a lot of the computer networking gear that goes into the 911 center itself that would need to be upgraded. The backhaul, that's just a fancy term for the microwave dishes and the infrastructure themselves, and that's what's on the mountaintops that it essentially carries these comms back and forth. That's the functional element. Video surveillance, site improvements, these are the types of things that we would like to do to harden our sites, to be able to better secure them, to be able to monitor them in real time. The site improvements, these are the things where sites that we already have, we would update them to be able to accommodate the new technology, separate from our site development, which are potentially areas that we could bring from the ground up. Not necessarily a brand new mountaintop site, but auxiliary stations where we can fold in technologies like fiber optics, miniature, microwave types of backhaul to kind of create a mesh system to bring this whole thing together. And then we wanted to include the site lease costs that we absorb on an annual basis. And so we tried to capture this to give a comprehensive view of what the construction year window, which is estimated to be about 2 years once we break ground on the project. And so we're looking at upwards of 19 million, but once again, with our increases, we could be well over 22 million, but we're going to be getting that information out probably in the next month or two. Any questions on that piece? So when we started to think about what would a district look like, a new district, a new administrative structure to manage the system separate from how the county does it now, which I'm basically in charge of, like Rachel alluded to, I'm just one person. The new system, the new demands is very much going to take an increased staff. So we wanted to make sure and look at what are those costs going to be, essentially what are the costs of business going to be on a day-to-day basis so that we could have something to compare to for folks to look at. And what we came up with on the expenditure side, essentially what you would see on any day-to-day business, the cost of running a business, all of the auxiliary costs that go into that, the cost of labor, et cetera, contractors. And then on the revenue side, we have the different forms of potential revenue. And I'll go into some detail about these. And these are all projections. These are not necessarily anything that's set in stone, but this is part of the reason that we're making all these presentations to councils, because we want the feedback from everyone or countywide to make sure that everyone feels like they have a voice in where we're going, and they have bought into the vision. Two of the major expenditures I want to call your attention to that Rachel alluded to earlier that we don't have in place now, and that's the second from the bottom over here, this annual savings. When federal did their projections of the new radio system and its life cycle, which is typically 15 to 20 years, they gave us a chart basically graphed over 15 and 20 years of the life cycle of the system and what it would take based on that 20-year life cycle on an annual basis to be able to keep the system current, to make sure that we have all the updates, to make sure that we're staying on top of new technology that comes out, being able to fold it in seamlessly. We would have to put away essentially over $1 million a year to meet those demands. Now that's year 1, year 2, year 3 with a brand new system. We're not expecting to have any major outflows of cash, but when you get into year 6, year 7, you're starting to see wear and tear on the system. Major technology updates have most likely come out. So that's when you start to see major influxes of cash that have to be made in order to keep your radio system current and to meet all the CGIS requirements and all the different things that go into handling a public safety system. Now, so that 1.1 million is actually just an annual basis, but it's not from year 1. I hope that makes sense. And save to be able to meet that demand when we come so that we're not starting at 0. Any questions on that piece? Okay, I'll move on. We're looking at several types of radio user fees. Now, this is if we go to a user fee model. Typically around the country, around Oregon, public safety agencies and users of a radio system will typically pay into the system to help support its function. Now, this could be based on usage, it could be based on a flat rate, it can be based on a number of things. But I'll go into a little bit of detail about what that would look like if we based it on usage relative to each emergency responder's use. But there's a couple of different types that I'd like to talk about. So an organization like PUD or the Transportation District or other entities that we would not necessarily think of as first responders in the sense that we would think of as law enforcement or fire. We consider these secondary users who utilize the system, but they're not utilizing necessarily for the same type of purpose. So we're going to look at some hypothetical fees that they could pay into the system, and that gives them access to the system. And it's essentially just a quantity of radios times a flat fee, and then that's what that agency would pay. The radio access of fees for public safety, to juxtaposition that with the secondary users, that varies. There's going to vary a little bit by the model that I show you, but that is more than likely going to be based, if we choose that model, on how the agency uses a radio system. So I'll show you a little bit about how we broke that down into percentage of use and how that translates into the cost of the system as a whole and the cost sharing model that any specific agency might realize. We're also looking into providing some service level agreements. I'll go into a little bit of detail about these, but essentially what these are is, in theory, we might have a shop here at Tillamook County. It could be at 911, it could be somewhere else, but we would offer services in-house, in-county to our first responders and the people that are involved in the system, where we would give them radio maintenance, we would give them subscriber maintenance, we would look at the equipment on their vehicle, we could provide annual maintenance, performative maintenance checks, things like that in that nature. And then those are going to be based on 2 different types based on the kind of the need that the user utilizes. Any questions on that piece? So for intents and purposes today, because we're here with Chief Harst Group, we're going to talk more about the secondary users. So these, the secondary users, we're just going to gloss over that. So someone like Tillamook County Transportation District, if they choose to be a part of this, they've got 50 radios, they would pay a flat fee at $20 a radio per month. Their cost would be approximately $12,000 a year to access the radio system. If they chose to sign up for a service level agreement for the same amount of radios, they could expect to pay about $6,000, and then that would get them access to the fees, the services and the structure of that service level agreement that would accommodate their usage.
John, can I ask you maybe to just move it up a little faster, because we've got about 10 more minutes allocated for you on this one. I want to get some questions.
Absolutely. So a little bit about how we chose the call for service and how it would be detailed out here. So Manzanita PD over the last 5 years averaged about 18,000 calls, 3,500 a year. They're only about 7.5% of the total radio usage. And then that comes into play here, the next slide, where If we just took a straight radio user fee and we divided it amongst all the public safety users, Manzanita has about 10 units. Divided into the total cost of what it would take to run the district, they're looking at almost $300,000 in radio system access fees just on annual basis. And then if they signed up for a service level, they could be looking at additional monies to have that service made available to them. Big numbers, I know. So a little bit about the revenue models. We looked at several different ones here. Like I say, this is not guaranteed. We just want to make sure that we put that out there, give some of the options, and then get feedback. If we looked at a taxes only measure, where we would have a levy that went out on taxes, and this would be all the costs would be borne by those taxes. So we figure out in order to meet the cost of our year-to-year operations, which is about $3.9 million, we're at 68 cents per thousand. That would go out countywide to all of our residents who pay property tax. That brings us into about 4 million. If we put the onus all on the public safety users, where they would have to come up with the amount that would equal the district's operating cost, then we come out to about 4.2 million, and that's with the service level agreements that have been signed up for across the board. Then we have a model that takes into both accounts, where we would have a levy in addition to the public safety paying into it. Now we realize that gives us a large surplus, but what Rachel and I's thought was this third column gives us a place to jump off and create this fourth column, which is unpopulated, but that would be our hybrid model. And we want to look to our users and to all the councils that we're going out to help us fill this in, where they've gone back, had discussions, looked at their budgets, come back to us and say, this is probably what's going to work for us. This is what we can afford. And then we start to fill out this fourth column here, and then we can move forward as a county and hopefully get to where we need to be with everyone feel like they have an equitable stake in moving forward. And I ran through that last part a little bit quickly. I know we're getting short on time, but now we have take a few of your questions if you'd like.
Okay, let's take a question. My initial comments is, boy, this looks like a complicated project, and it looks like it's going to be pretty darn expensive too. So the numbers you're showing us are a couple of years old, right? So you're going to have to factor in some more money for, I mean, inflation, probably 10, 20% a year to get to a real actual number. You say you're going to put those numbers out here in the next month or so?
Yes, we just wanted to make sure, hit all the initial meetings to make sure that everyone saw the same set of numbers. And then we're going to be releasing the updated numbers to all the stakeholders at once. So everyone will see the updated numbers at once.
Wow. Well, we've got about 5 minutes or so for questions. Anybody from the council have some questions on this project? This is a big project, obviously.
Yeah, I do, Mike, if that's possible.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of things. I just want to compliment both Rachel and John on the good work they've done. As I've been around a long time and I've seen this process come and go, and this is the first time that I've seen it actually come to completion, which is close to a miracle. So you guys have really done a great job. Costly though it may be, it is critical to the county to be able to communicate in emergencies, and particularly in significant emergencies that we may face down the line. So again, I really compliment you on the work you've done. My question has more to do with the ham radio network, and if it is possible to communicate, if this takes into account the overlay that might allow the ham network, the volunteers that are working on the ham network and in 911 to communicate. Have you thought about that? What are the implications of that, and what might be a step forward?
So Linda, I appreciate the question. This essentially from the jump has been geared towards public safety users, but that doesn't mean that we haven't considered the ham integration. There's not anything in the numbers that we have looked at specifically for updating ham equipment or anything like that. But in the spirit of public safety and cooperation and interoperability, there's always going to be a place for the ham community to help help us with emergency management and incidents and things like that. So to answer your question, no, we didn't look at anything specific relative to ham, but the door is always open for that, and for structure and infrastructure and facilities and all that type of thing. So we definitely.
I would really encourage that. I think volunteers are a strong resource to the public safety during major emergencies, and the ability to communicate back and forth is going to be really important.
I agree.
Any other questions from the council?
Mayor, I don't really have a question. Mayor, I don't have a question necessarily, but I would like to make a comment. And the comment, you know, maybe unlike most of you, maybe in chief part, I spent a lifetime in public safety aspect using emergency radios, and have had don't work, or you're in a place where no one can hear you, and it's unsafe. It's horrible feeling to be out there all by yourself. So I remember the radio when this is like 1980s radio technology, and we really desperately need to.
I think you're fading out, Steve. Matter of fact, it looks like we lost you.
The internet has been really sketchy. I've had to go in and out about 3
Oh,
times.
here he comes.
I'm going to give you the thumbs up, but we need to pursue this.
Yeah,
That we need to support this. That the radio technology that I saw during my ride along is antiquated, and moving towards a trunking system that John described. John, just for your humor, I'm an old guy, so I actually spent the night in WACA, which is the Washington County Consolidated Communications Center, on the very first day, because we were worried that the fire dispatcher didn't have the experience yet to be able to handle a big event. So I go way back on emergency communications and large centers. And I just tell you that I strongly support this effort.
Thank you. You know, it is an expensive effort. We understand that. Unfortunately, the can has been kicked so far down the road. We're so far behind. I think from a public standpoint, from life, health, and safety of our officers, firefighters, and EMS, we really feel strongly that it's time to make a substantive move towards changing it up.
absolutely.
Well, John and Rachel, we thank you guys for coming and giving this presentation. I'm sure you'll keep us up to date as you move forward, because you're not done yet.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, Chief.
I'm going to send it back to Layla. We have one more item for discussion this afternoon, which is the salary study. So you want to take it away, Layla?
I do. Need to share my screen. Oh, just waiting to get permission. All right, good meeting. You see the workshop discussion?
Yep.
Slide, cool. All right. Well, thanks. I'm really excited to talk to you about the salary survey. I had planned to come to council with a resolution for the salaries, but thought it would be helpful because I'm doing some repositioning to walk through some of that, share what the results from the salary survey were, and then my recommendations for next steps. Tied to that, however, is a discussion, I think, on fees as well. And it will all make sense as I will run through the presentation, but I want to make sure we cover both because they are related. So what I'm going to do is go through the full presentation, and then we'll back up to talk about the salary survey and then move forward again to talk about the fees discussion, or however you guys want to go about it. So just again, to remind folks, kind of our organizational chart, you've seen this before. We do a lot of stuff at the city, and currently we're structured in this way. Really, I oversee The chief oversees the police department, public works oversees the public works. I oversee those too. And then the city manager oversees all of these different divisions and the staff that fill those divisions. Our current FTE, after our last discussion for the planning and permit tech, we had 15.1, and council approved the increase so we could have a full-time planning and permit specialist. But this is how we were are now made up. And oh, sorry, here's the FTE increase that got us, sorry, those slides were backwards, but you feel me. So the proposed organizational chart, it changes a little bit. So the finance specialist, which is Nina, moves to an accounting manager position. So this is a promotion, and this will reflect a great deal more job responsibilities than Nina has had. She has been doing a wonderful job really carrying a lot of these responsibilities so far. But once we move into July, she will assume a great deal more. But that person will administer and manage and carry out the city's accounting activities and functions. She helps with everything from interfund accounting, supporting the water division, utility building fees, etc. She'll be taking more of a leadership role in working with other staff to account for those changes and for developing and creating procedures as well, and working with me to recommend policies if we need them. She will be taking a much greater role and already has. I'm so grateful to her for the budget, risk management, and then we'll be taking on more responsibilities with respect to contract management. Secondly, the building official, as Scott Gebhardt, will also be promoted into the development services manager position. Scott will be taking on supervisory responsibilities in this role and will help oversee the planning, building, and short-term rental inspection programs. Scott's doing a lot of this work already. I think when we start getting into budget, you can see what a wonderful job he's done in creating revenue for the building department. He's done a great job really helping me carry the planning part of this position. I'll maintain the role as sort of the planning director, but Scott will sort of oversee the day-to-day activities of that division. And I'll talk a little bit more about how the divisions will change. This is also a new thing, is that we currently have, if you recall, a 0.6 FTE for a court clerk who is also helping with some administrative responsibilities as well. This is Ashley Meyer's position, and she has done an outstanding job getting our court documents organized and filed. And so I tapped her to see if she would be open to working as the assistant city recorder. And what I've done is I've combined the court clerk, and I have changed the assistant city manager position to an assistant city recorder position, and combined the court clerk with some essential job duties of the assistant city recorder. Now, you'll recall that when I came to you in February to ask for that additional FTE, half FTE to support the building and planning department, I had planned to hire a full-time assistant city recorder. And as I started preparing and diving deep into the budget, it became apparent to me that what I needed to do right now is establish kind of my baseline staff, like what the city essentially can't live without. And I certainly could use an assistant. I could use a lot of help in terms of some day-to-day activities, and this position will help support that. But what I did is I made a conscious choice to combine these positions and position us to be in a better shape for when we have a city hall that we can open. We possibly could have some room for an administrative level assistant, front desk person to help with the community and interface. So at this time, I'm actually going to be recommending that we leave that, we convert the court clerk position to an assistant position, and that actually remains open during this budget cycle. And again, that's just for us to be mindful of resources. One of the things I'm really doing, if you can't tell, is really investing in both educating and training and mentoring staff So I'm really excited about this change. I'm grateful to Ashley for stepping up and stepping in the role because as you all know, getting our records, particularly our resolutions, ordinances, and council documents organized is really critical. And I know she's going to do an outstanding job. So again, the administrative assistant, that will move to an administrative assistant and it will be unfilled for this fiscal year will be my recommendation. I'm also proposing that currently we have a 0.5 FTE in the Public Works Department, and that 0.5 FTE is solely dedicated to servicing our visitors' facilities. I am proposing to put that position to a 0.6, which would make that individual eligible for benefits. We need the extra hours, and I believe that that is aligned with the ethic of retention and supporting our staff is providing benefits as well to that position. So I will be recommending that as part of my budget proposal. So where that leaves us is a new sort of structure. Police and Public Works stay the same. I still will oversee the Development Services division, but that will be, Scott will oversee the planning and permit tech and will provide supervisory support to the program manager, Judy's position. And Judy and I will still be completely connected, but that really helps me in terms of day-to-day. And Scott's just done a really, he and Judy have been working together for a while. It seems to be working really well. So a lot of positive feelings around here, it seems like. And then under the city manager, and I'm sorry, I should have changed that to accounting manager, but that's how the structure will look. Just to kind of remind folks of where we all live right now, we're just sort of spread out like peanut butter, but the city manager, assistant city recorder, and accounting manager will be in the temporary city hall building, and then the new permit tech building official and the program manager will be at the water treatment plant. So on to the salary study. So the scope this year was we looked at 8 comparator organizations. So we stuck with the same ones we used the last time. LGPS did what they did before. They evaluated job duties and quals, as well as program and supervisory responsibility to address insufficient job matches. You've probably heard this before, but because of the fact that many of our positions are not specialized, that we actually have to cover so many different responsibilities, it's often hard to find comparable positions. They looked at both pay as well as benefits. And if you recall, the assessment is based on the market median max. So they look at all the comparators and what that median max, so the top end of the pay scale, is what they're looking at. And the city policy has been to be within plus or minus 10% of the market median maximum. We have sort of tilted towards the negative side of that, and you'll see that I'm proposing something a little different. LGPS recommendations for benefits were actually pretty well covered, but for, and this was in the last survey as well, is we're the only city that doesn't offer any kind of life insurance. This is the recommended salary schedule. So to just note for folks what's changed, what haven't, and I'll go through the details in a moment. I noted these new positions. So these are not new FTEs that have been added. Just to clarify again, these are positions that existing staff are being promoted, or the actual brand new position we have, which is the planning and permit specialist. The LGPS recommended a correction for the police chief, no change for public works director, no change for police officers, correction for short-term program manager, public works utility clerk, utility worker, and senior utility worker. So a lot of recommended changes. LGPS recommended, so for the police chief, again, here's the salary scale. This is the market median max. The current salary for a chief is 14.3% below the market median max, and the recommendation from LGPS gets us a little closer to that 0 mark. Short-term program manager, again, about 2% below the median max, and the proposal gets the position just 2% above. Public Works Utility Clerk, that was operating pretty below, 21% below. So the recommendation gets us at 11. Utility Worker, again, roughly 13% below the market median max. And this is actually, I think, one of the more important corrections, because this is also the lowest paid position on the salary scale. So this correction to 11.4 feels appropriate. And then finally, the senior utility worker was a little bit closer than the utility worker, but again, it was a recommended correction to that. I have a few changes I would recommend. I accept all the LGPS recommendations, but for the police officer position, the short-term program manager position, and the public works director. My proposal is for the police officer position to meet the median max. So to get our guys in blue meeting the median max so that their salary is consistent with that. The second correction is when I read through the salary, I'm sorry, I know these positions really well. And I believe that this STR program manager has the same amount of responsibility as an assistant city recorder. And that means that person's, Judy manages our transit lodging tax. She does citations. She has a great deal of responsibility, and I would feel more comfortable placing her in the same range as the assistant city recorder based on my in-depth understanding of the position. I also am going to propose a 5% increase for our public works director to account for emergency operations and IT management. Dan has done a tremendous job in taking on those additional, I just want to highlight, additional responsibilities above what he already does. And he's just been doing a tremendous job. So this is the recommended salary schedule. And again, I'll bring this to you in a resolution form, but I wanted to talk with you about those proposed changes. I think, my proposal leans towards the positive side because I'm focusing on retention. And I know it's, I don't want this to sound like hyperbole. I've been here almost a year. I've grown to know all of the staff. And these people are deeply dedicated. I've seen many of them take on challenges, joining me in challenges, and really pushing themselves. And we are just incredibly lucky to have such a team of dedicated individuals. And I hope Dan doesn't mind me sharing, but he said, for the first time ever, he feels like he can go on vacation because he has a team that that he believes in and that really support what we're doing here. And I would say the same is true for me after budget, of course. But I really feel like this team that I'm building, the level of commitment that I have experienced here is it's just really inspiring. And so I really think that leaning towards this 10%, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that's so important, because I want to retain this team. I want these people here. I also want to note that we excited a bunch of people when we started this process, and there are a number of cities who are updating their salary studies. And so, as you all know, I'm a long-range thinker. I'm already thinking 4 years ahead. We can expect to see some differences then, because I think a lot of cities are understanding what our staff and our people are facing in terms of being able to live and afford to be out here. And we're all getting competitive with each other. So just keep your eyes open for that. I think this correction, I should just note, gets us to market as of yesterday. So there will be a cost of living adjustment. And I do believe I'll be proposing some level of life insurance for consideration. And again, I want to mention that we'll be concluding health insurance for all employees, which will include a prorated option for part-time staff. And that's just something I feel very strongly. about. I believe that these changes with the COLA will provide more livable wages for our staff. And why does that matter? Just want to kind of highlight for you that the median household income according to the Census 2020 in Tillamook is $54,268. And the median household costs in Manzanita are $2,087. The measure that people use to determine whether or not you have housing that's affordable is whether or not one pays 30% or less of their income. So in order to live in Manzanita at that cost, you have to earn $7,000 a month. So basically, I think that's just really something we have to be aware of, that that's what many of our staff are facing. Many of them, including our police and our utility workers, have to live within 20 minutes of the city. And so that really limits their options in terms of where they can be. I also just want to highlight for you, as we've said it, and I'm a visual person, but we're talking massive inflation. And so I'm expecting, and I would like to propose something that supports our staff, because I think we're all experiencing quite a bit of pain because of that change. So with that, I'm going to jump in, and I don't know, maybe we could pause here as long as we promise to come back to this. I'll defer to the mayor to decide if you'd like me to keep going, or if we should maybe stop and talk a little bit about the salary survey first.
Maybe we should take a little break here and see if we got some questions. First of all, I want to just make some comments. We've been through a couple of really tough years with COVID, and this staff that works for the city has stuck through this and not taking vacations, worked extra hours. We've all seen what they've done, and I think Layla's done an excellent job here in what she's analyzed. We're working in an environment right now where the employment pool in the country and locally and in the state of Oregon is very low, and people are looking for good employees. And we have good employees, and we want to retain them. It's much easier to retain somebody than to go out and lose somebody and then have to go out and rehire. We've got a great staff here. The morale is high. Leela's doing a good job leading them, and we must pay a competitive salary and provide a modern working environment to retain people. And that's what we're attempting to do with our new city hall and so forth. And this is the team that Layla has put together and wants to work with, and I think we ought to support her. So I'm 100% for everything that she's proposed. So any questions from anybody else? Now that I put the hammer on it.
I guess, Mayor, I appreciate all the information on the salary study, and I truly appreciate the need for us to be competitive in the market, which apparently this is what the market is. So I appreciate all that and be very supportive of it. The one thing I want to say, though, and I say this with a smile on my face every single time that we have the opportunity to get together and talk about staffing. We went through a couple of years of effort on the short-term rental work group. A prime aspect of that discussion throughout the entire time was providing some oversight and enforcement effort as a result of short-term rentals. Without that, we will never achieve the kind of livability that we are trying to maintain in Manzanita. I once again strongly ask for at least a part-time person during the summertime to provide oversight for short-term rentals, which means evening hours, which means weekend duty. But I think personally that can be achieved by hiring someone for a few months during the top of the season to see what that bears out, because we'll find out pretty quickly about the workload and the activity levels that are going to occur. I think they'll be significant. And our short-term rental work group for 2 years talked about that issue on every single meeting, and I would dare say it came very close to being the #1 priority. And for us not to follow up after that and not provide that oversight it does a disservice to our efforts to improve the livability in the community. I'll get off my soapbox, and I know, Layla, no disrespect. And you and I have had this discussion. We come from maybe a little different perspective on this. But I will, every time I have the chance at least, ask for that, including doing something this year and this summer as we go into the short-term rental season. So thank you.
So I just have one quick comment, having been on the council for some time. It has been our practice over the years to pay slightly below the level required. It's been cost savings. We've been very careful with how we've expended our monies, and just by lots of luck, we have been able to keep some of our good staff. Right now, we have the best staff I've ever seen at the city that works better together than has typically happened in the past. They enjoy their work. They come to work with a smile. They're doing more work than they've ever done before. And I just think it would be a terrible disservice not to give them the compensation they truly deserve. They're an outstanding group. Layla has done a great job of bringing them together, and the city is getting more bang for the buck from this group of people than I think we have in the past. And it's because we're stepping up and we're rewarding their good work. So I strongly support the increase in compensation, and I think it's really long overdue. So thank you, Layla, for the work that you've done, and much thanks to the team that works for the city. You've just gone far beyond what the expectations are, and we're so proud of you. So from my perspective, I'm guessing from the full council, we strongly support this increase in compensation.
Well, we got lucky with COVID, and we ended up with more short-term rental income than we thought. So we have the ability to do this, and I agree with what everybody's saying. These people need to be rewarded for sticking with us for the last 2 years, which was
Absolutely.
in some cases was a living hell. So anybody else want to jump in here?
Well,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to mirror what everyone has said so far, and I do, through my work, get to interact with the municipalities of Cannon Beach. I was there today, Nehalem, Wheeler, Tillamook County, and I have no complaints. I mean, I get good service and good help, competent help everywhere I go, but the city of Manzanita's ability to respond to needs of the community is it's at the top, and it's I always know that it's going to be easiest and quickest working, and not just because they know who I am, because actually I don't think I get any kind of extra treatment, but the competency here, the commitment, it's above the grade, and I'm very supportive of compensating our staff for that and trying to retain them.
Can I ask one other technical question, I guess, and Layla, tell me if I'm out of bounds here, even, and maybe you want to do this in a different environment, but last year during the budget process, and I think I brought this up actually in one of our pre-budget meeting about compensation for standby, and has that discussion occurred, or is that included in, was there a salary study effort done for that as well, and are we going to make an adjustment for that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Councilor Nuttall. They did look at on-call pay and standby pay as part of the study, and recommended that we're in good standing now. But the chief has brought it up to me, and it'll be something that he and I discuss over the next year.
So are you suggesting the study indicated that what we are providing for compensation for standby is within the norms?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Well, Layla, what's our next step on this? Are you bringing this to the council next month for us to approve, or what?
Yes. I will bring a resolution with the salaries in that for you to approve in May. And then
Okay.
it can, then that's where we'll be.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of information today with
Yeah.
these three topics. It's about 10 to 5, and if nobody has any other questions or issues, should we take a break for dinner and come back at 6
Oh,
o'clock?
wait, I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were.
I have
Go ahead. You got 10 minutes.
a couple more things to talk about. So my presentation's still up.
Yeah, yeah. it's
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about money. I've been spending a lot of time looking at money and budgets and doing lots of spreadsheets, and I want to talk about fees. So, we've been growing for a while, and we've done a really good job maintaining. You guys might recall this image here. I want to sort of highlight that we're no longer in maintenance mode. I think everyone here knows that, and we've been in growth mode for some time, and we have some serious catching up to do. What I would like to highlight is that we have enough resources, right? Even if we freeze short-term rentals, which we'll talk about tonight, we're good. And I've said that we're good to maintain kind of where we are. But we're, like I said, we're in growth mode, and we are no longer in maintenance mode. And so we have to figure out how we can move forward to deliver these goals. So we talked about 3 goals: level up, budget forward, and envision Manzanita. That'll get us a lot closer to this. But to deliver on that, I think we need two things. The one we just talked about, which is a solid team, and I got that in spades. We are ready, and folks are eager and doing a great job. But we also need enough resources to meet the demands of growth. So we have a team. Now we need to get some resources. And so as I look at next year's budget, I'm ready to get started on the stuff now. But as we potentially, as we face kind of sort of having static income from a while, which I'm totally cool with, I do want us to be mindful that we have to address some policy questions about, whether or not we want to continue doing. So I basically think we can continue to do what we're doing now with what we have, or we can take steps to raise a little more revenue and do more. So we've set some ambitious and necessary goals, and we need to talk about what it's going to take to fund it. We're dealing with construction cost escalation for road projects, and Dan will be providing me an update on that soon. But when we started talking about budget 10 months ago, we weren't in the midst of a war happening and driving costs up. And so we're really in a place where there's a lot of uncertainty. So the question is, will we take steps to address this sooner than later? We have the revenue diversification strategy committee. We'll talk about that later. That's totally going to start and kick off and help position us over the next year to several years. I'm looking at repositioning TLT promotion funds to cover staff time for maintaining visitor-related facilities. I got a legal opinion that is okay. So trying to do more with what we have and be creative about how we're using our resources. So we can do those things. But I also think we can do some stuff in the really near term that would help offset some of the additional costs we're going to have to face as a community this next year due to some of these externalities that are affecting us. So I just want to throw it out there. This is just planting seeds for the council. And if anyone is interested in talking more about this, we can put it on for next month's agenda. Or you can maybe direct me to start moving forward with something. But I wanted to throw out the idea of the short-term rental operator fee, just to give some folks context of what that could do for us. So that's the fee that the county was talking about that they have in place. We would have garnered about 200 grand last year and 100,000 the year before. Just that would really help address some of the cost increases we're going to see due to those factors. We're floating the idea of a technology fee. Scott Pope went in place for building, and that's generated a significant amount of resources. It certainly made a good dent, and we have options that we could apply those to other fees. For example, the city pays money for every single transaction that we run here, and we run a lot. So those two alone would, I think, have a real nexus to the goals that we're trying to implement. And what I'm talking about is putting money into professional services to hire consultants to help us start doing outreach and engaging with the community now. Hiring a consultant to help us with the budget work. I really feel like to continue along with the same philosophy of budgeting that we have, being conservative, having some additional resources coming in this next fiscal year would be rad. If not, I still think we could pull it off, but we walk a skinnier line, and it'll be up to the budget committee to decide if that's where we want to go. And I'll make a recommendation I feel comfortable with, but I would feel awesome if we had a little bit more resources. And finally, I just want to shoot this out there because Bay City does this, and they charge $10 a month per connection for roads. So they use it because there's a real connection between roads and water. And, you know, I ran some back of the envelope numbers, and if we did something like this, and again, this would be the ratepayers, that would yield approximately $200,000 a year, which could be directly and solely dedicated to the road fund. The road fund really only has gas tax, and then it's really supplemented by the general fund. So starting to take steps like this, they're small, but they're meaningful. We can start to then utilize the general fund a lot more efficiently than we are now, and actually charging the users of the system what we need in order to maintain the streets that we have. You know, when I saw, as I was working through the budget, the revenue that the building department generated this year, it kind of gave me a pit in my stomach that we hadn't been able to leverage the resources from the development that occurred here. Even though we got money for the building fund, I looked at that as lost opportunity for roads and for storm. So I know we're going to try to address those in the budget revenue diversification committee. But I just wanted to throw these out there as potential near-term solutions, see if there's any interest in me potentially pursuing something even for this budget year. I could prepare a resolution certainly for the operator fee in time for May, just being a little bit optimistic here. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And so I will stop sharing. And you only have 5 minutes left, so I'll take what you got.
Go ahead, Steve.
So thank you for the update. Two things. One is I'm a little reluctant to start embarking on a road of creating new revenue streams when we just appointed or about to appoint a what do we call? I'm sorry. We're calling it a
Revenue diversification
committee. You're right. I'm sorry. So I'd rather be, I guess the word isn't consistent, but I would like to be methodical in the way that we approach this rather than deciding to implement crosswalks and maybe frustrating. But I did bring up the issue, and I'm going to do it again, about the need for some additional oversight in the field for short-term rentals. And I received absolutely no feedback from anyone. And so for my own personal purposes, is that just something no one has an interest in, even though the short-term rental work group made it almost a #1 priority? Do we not have any interest in pursuing at least a temporary person to provide some insight as to what that position might accomplish? I'm just looking for some feedback because I don't want to hear myself keep talking here if there's no.
Can I throw 2 cents in here? Yeah. You know what I'd like to see us do, and we kind of muffed this a year ago when John was still here. The county put in that licensing fee program. We should have piggybacked right on it immediately, and we didn't. And it kind of fell off the burner. And that's exactly the item that we could do immediately and use that revenue to get somebody you're talking about, Steve. That could be the use for it. You know, let's get them on board and get why we're not charging the same fee, user or the licensing fee that the county charges or Cannon Beach charges is beyond me.
I can remind you, Mayor, why that idea didn't go very far. I believe you proposed that we should use the money to help build a new city hall, and that was the objection. I recall Steve and Hans and myself all expressing reservations about pursuing the fee at the time because of the
You're
purpose.
you're right, Jerry.
Okay,
I
all
think
right.
that's.
So I think there's good policy.
So, but I sense that maybe that wasn't the right reason, but it's, I think fulfilling this job that the short-term rental group proposed before, which I haven't followed up on, would be a perfect use for that additional revenue, wouldn't it? Be better
Mayor,
than
I guess
saying,
maybe, sometimes the vision for each of us is a little bit different. My vision for this position initially is a part-time college student hired kind of thing where you bring them in for 4, and I know Layla has concerns about bringing them up to speed and the time it takes to do that and staff resources associated with that. But this is not rocket science. This is a person that can come in and after a day or two of some discussion and training can effectively perform the kinds of duties that the short-term rental work group and myself believe are necessary. And that's basically going out and being a glad hander with the short-term rental community for the people that are visiting the community, ensuring that they're complying with the rules and regulations that we have implemented for short-term rental behavior. But you can't do that from a desk in City Hall, and you can't do it Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It requires somebody to be out in the field, providing the oversight, making the contacts, and doing that in the evening, doing that on the weekends when the problems are actually occurring. And until we do that, all the things that we create here in terms of policies and procedures might as well go by the wayside, because without enforcement, it's just it just isn't going to happen. So I just was a little disappointed that I saw no reaction from anybody, which I take to mean you don't have any support for it.
Let me put my two cents in, Steve. I apologize for not being enthusiastic enough, but I definitely am much more supportive of enforcement than I am, restricting and barring people's rights to use their property. I think that if we have enough enforcement, a lot of these issues will go away, including some enforcement of people who live here full time. There's plenty of nuisance behavior that's not just temporary visitors coming through, but I'm very supportive of that, and it seems like a perfect rationale for the operator fee to pay for this kind of enforcement and try to manage what's become a very significant industry here.
let me make a suggestion. Layla, can you put this down as an item for our workshop next month, the licensing fee, and possibly tying it together with this person, and we can have some more time and talk it through a little bit more. How's that sound, Steve?
Thank you for allowing me to be the cat's patoot, but I wanted to.
And Jerry,
I just don't want to let it go.
We can talk about that fee being used for something other than City Hall, which you're right, was a roadblock before, and we'll figure it out. How's that?
Well, the only thing I'll say about that is the money isn't the issue. This is a drop in the bucket for a short-term, part-time person. We're not talking about significant money here. So to impose a fee for this, for what I'm describing, we need to come up with.
Maybe that's not the exact answer, but we have to have a better described usage for the fee to get in line with what everybody else is doing. And just saying it's going to be used for the City Hall, that's not good. So
thank you for this.
And I think I was offering that we have 3 goals and we have to somehow pay for those goals too. So if we're going to be paying for a comprehensive plan, if we're going to be paying for getting some professional advice on how to expand our revenue, we need more resources to do that. And so it's a policy choice here, is whether or not we just continue to do what we're doing and react, or we can be proactive. And so I hear you about the enforcement position. I know Councilor Nettle and I have talked about this, so I won't do it. We'll save it for next month. We actually agree, but phasing is a little different, and I respect what he's saying. But what I would ask is you also consider putting this fee in place. Like I said, we have a lot of things that we're facing right now as a community, and we've put forward some pretty ambitious goals. And right now, we're not really set up to achieve them, and I want to achieve them. I came here to help us do that, and so I'm appealing to you to consider helping fund those those goals as well. And eventually that could include a position, but we'll table it till next month.
Yeah, throw that item, that user fee on the workshop for next month, and we can tie this all together, because we're running out of time here. We gotta take a break to go have dinner or a stiff drink of bourbon or whatever you guys do between now and 6 o'clock. Do we got everything covered for right now? It's about 5 after 5, so
Yeah, thank you for.
okay, I'm gonna adjourn the workshop. We'll see you guys at 6.
Okay, good meeting, Mike. Thank you.
Guys.